So I have been asked to talk a little bit about the idea of right view and how to use right view in one's practice. And what is very interesting is that right view has very profound implications for one's practice. From the very beginning, when you start out, how you deal with things in daily life, how you deal with your fellow human beings, how you think about the world, all of these things have to do with right view. And then when it comes to meditation practice, right view has a very significant part in meditation practice because it helps you to have the right values. The values is what decide what is you prioritize, what is important to you. So if you prioritize the breath, if you value the breath, you will tend to go to the breath. So this is about the values, and that comes from right view again, how we think about the world, what is important to us and what is not. And then at the very end of the path, you, of course, right view is the thing that finally gets established in you at the very end of the path as a kind of wisdom, as an understanding of the world, how we see reality at the end of the path. And so right view has this very broad application throughout the practice, from the very beginning, in our daily life, in our meditation practice, all the way to the very end of the path. So it's an incredibly useful, important thing to cultivate and to think about. And when you think about the Buddhist path, the Noble Eightfold Path, the Noble Eightfold Path, of course, begins with the idea of right view. Samma Ditti is right there at the very beginning. And so Samma Ditti is what supports the entire Buddhist path. Without Samma Ditti, there is no path, there is no practice, there is nothing there. And this is why, in a sense, we rely on the Buddha to arise in the world. The Buddha is the one who discovers the path. And then he says, actually, there is this path. You wouldn't believe it. It's amazing. It leads all the way to the end of suffering. Can you believe that? No, can't believe that. But it's true. Check it out. Okay, I'll check it out. And so right view is kind of the thing which starts the whole thing. And the Buddha is the one who exemplifies kind of the idea of right view, the right view arising in the world and then becoming available to everyone because the Buddha had that insight. So right view is very, very significant. So what I want to do today, I want to talk a little bit about how this can be a few different ways in which we can use this idea of right view in our practice. Excuse me, I'm just going to have a little bit of coffee. I know that if I have coffee, the Finnish listeners will be very happy because the Finnish are the number one coffee drinkers in the world. Is that right? That's what I understand. Right. So we create a connection straight away, which is great. So how do we think about the idea of right view? And one very interesting way to think about this is sometimes we talk about how to be virtuous, how to live a good life, how to be kind, how to overcome doing the wrong kind of things, how to overcome speaking in the wrong way or acting in the wrong way, and all of these kind of things. And what you will often hear is that, well, what you have to do is you just have to be mindful. And if you are mindful, then you will be aware of your actions and you can stop the bad actions and then you can do the good ones. You can stop the bad speech and you can just do the right speech. So just be mindful. And then you try to be mindful in your daily life and you try always to do the right thing. And then you discover how difficult it is. How hard it is to always be mindful, how hard it is to always say the right thing, never to have any ill will or bad temper or anything like that, always to be compassionate and have love for your fellow human beings, right? It is very difficult. And very often we fall back into our old habits and our old ways. There are certain things in us that trigger things, that trigger our anger, that trigger our wrong behavior or whatever it might be, because we are triggered by the environment. It can be a family member. When they say that one thing, it always upsets you, right? You know what it's like with family. Everything is so close together. And so the reality is that, yes, it is important to be mindful, but actually it is very difficult to be mindful. So the question is, how can we empower the mindfulness to enable us to actually live in the right way, to always do the right thing? This becomes one of those critical understandings of the Buddhist path. How can we empower that mindfulness? And the answer, as I will show you, is actually right view. Right view empowers the mindfulness. And to be able to understand this, I'm going to give you a simile. This is a simile I teach quite regularly. At least recently, I've been teaching the simile. I don't know if any of you have heard my talks online, but if you have, you may have heard the simile before. So this is the idea that, you go into the city, wherever that might be, Helsinki or wherever it is that you are. You go into the city and you go to one of the main streets in the city. Now, if you come to the main street in a large city, it's in the middle of the day, what do? You're going to cross the street. Well, before you cross the street, you will look left, you will look right, and you probably look left again and right again. Or is it, I can't remember now whether it's right first or left first, because it gets very confusing when you, with all these different countries, whatever, you look in both directions, right? Maybe a few times. And you do that, and every time you come to a street, you always look left and right first. And what is very interesting is that it doesn't matter how much mindfulness you have. These days, people walk around with their mobile phones and they are watching their mobile phones, they are watching TikTok, or they are filming themselves, or whatever it is that they do. I don't even have a mobile phone, so I'm very happy about that, but I can see how people are, how they use their mobile phones. And sometimes they have almost no mindfulness at all. There's no mindfulness at all. They're completely engrossed in this mobile phone. But even if they have virtually no mindfulness, still they always remember to look left and right before they cross the street. It is very rare that someone is so engrossed in the mobile phone that they forget to look left and right. Because it just doesn't happen. And that is very interesting. Why is it that they always remember to look left and right? And the very simple answer is because they have right view. They understand that crossing the street is dangerous. And because they understand that crossing the street is dangerous, and because that understanding is lodged in their mind in a very, very powerful way, even if they have zero mindfulness, the right view comes up from below or comes up from behind, informs the mindfulness, and then makes you look left and right before you cross the street. This is the power of right view, that actually it informs the mindfulness. And even when you don't have very much mindfulness, that right view will make the mindfulness arise so that you can do the right thing at the right time. This is the power of mindfulness, of right view rather. And so, you understand the danger of crossing the road, and that's why you always look left and right. And so what we need to do is a very similar thing in our own life. We have to understand the danger in doing the wrong thing. We have to understand the danger of not doing the right thing at the right time, doing an act of kindness, doing an act of generosity, or whatever it might be. We have to understand the danger of that. If you don't take the opportunity to do what is right, if you end up doing something bad, you are basically letting yourself down. You are creating the bad conditions. You are allowing old habits to carry on into the future. And these old habits eventually will lead to all they might wreck your life, or they might lead to a bad rebirth, or whatever. So in one sense, and this is what is so interesting about this simile, in one sense, doing the wrong thing, doing something that is unethical or immoral, is far more dangerous than crossing that street. Because if you cross the street, okay, you might die. Okay, so you die. Okay, then you get reborn again. You just go somewhere else, and then you carry on with your life. But if you carry out an unethical act, if that is what you do, not only do you let yourself down, but it might actually lead to a lot of suffering in the future. If that bad act leads to a bad rebirth in the future, you have to do many bad acts to lead to bad rebirth, but over time it will. Then it has a long-term consequences of suffering for yourself. Dying is a small amount of suffering, and then you get reborn and you carry on. But this leads to long-term suffering in the future. And so doing that wrong act is far more dangerous than crossing the street. This is the idea of right view. And so you need to make this very clear in your mind, that this actually is dangerous. And the more clear that is, the more right view you have, it will help you to live an ethical life as a consequence, because you know the danger. So how do we do this? Because it sounds nice in theory, but how can we actually do this? And so what we need to do, we need to understand the danger in doing something that is wrong, something that is unethical, coming from a wrong intention, coming from anger or ill will or whatever it might be. And so what we need is a kind of a sense of urgency, the sense that now is the time to do the right thing, not tomorrow, not in an hour, yeah, but now in this moment. What am I thinking right now? Am I having good thoughts? Am I thinking something stupid? Am I kind of, what am I doing right in this moment? And so we understand that the sense of urgency means I cannot wait with doing what is right. I have to do what is right now. So how can we get that sense of urgency? One of the great ways of getting the sense of urgency is to contemplate the Buddhist idea of impermanence. Impermanence, this idea of anicca, that nothing is really lasting, everything is uncertain, everything is unreliable. Yeah, it's always changing around the world. And this idea of impermanence gives you this feeling that there is nowhere to stand. There's nothing to hold on to in the world. Everything is always moving, everything is always shaking. Nothing is reliable. And this feeling that nothing is reliable means that you don't know what's going to happen around the corner. Maybe you're going to die around the corner. Who knows when death is going to come? These things are incredibly uncertain. We always tend to assume we're going to be around for a while, but actually we have no idea about that. You see, the world is changing very fast now. You can see all the politics in the world seems to be changing very, very fast. And it's kind of unsettling. Yeah, it's some people even scary when they see the politics in the world going in the wrong way. We don't know what's going to happen next. What's going to happen with the climate? What's going to happen with all the refugees maybe in the world when this climate is getting worse? What has happened if a meteorite hits the Earth and kind of, creates another big crater somewhere, or something like that? All of these things are possibilities. The next pandemic, suddenly Zoom doesn't work anymore and we can't have these meetings, maybe. Yeah, I mean, there's one beautiful thing about modern technology is that we can have Dhamma talks and contemplate Dhamma across the vast distances of space, which is a wonderful thing. So it is so incredibly uncertain in the world. And when you understand that uncertainty, when you understand that you have no idea what's going to happen next, you have no idea how long Buddhism is going to be around, you have no idea when this opportunity is going to be there again, then you take the opportunity now. Now is the only chance you have. It is a matter of urgency to do what is right. You cannot wait. And if you don't do it now, why would you do it tomorrow? Yeah, your feeling of being negligent about the spiritual path is going to be the same tomorrow, very likely, as it is now. So now is the opportunity. And so this is an idea of how you use the idea of impermanence. Yeah, death, the contemplation of death is a very powerful contemplation in Buddhism, and it is part of the idea of impermanence, the part of the idea of uncertainty, of instability, of unreliability. Death comes into that, and it kind of is brings. So use the death contemplation as a powerful way of contemplating impermanence. Yeah, remind yourself that you're going to die. Remind yourself you don't know when it is going to be. That is the most scary part. It can happen very quickly. One crazy driver in the streets. Yeah, I know that that there are fewer crazy drivers in the Nordic countries and many other places, but still, there's still a few crazy drivers there too. And so, yeah, this is how it goes. You remind yourself of the uncertainties. And then when you do that, the sense of urgency arises. The right view is there. When you come to a street, you always look left and right. Every time you're going to do an action, you ask yourself, is this coming from kindness, or is it maybe coming from something unwholesome? And you know the importance. And so you change the course because you understand what really matters in your life. So this is one way of thinking about or using the idea of right view. Yeah? And it is very powerful because it informs the mindfulness, and it allows the mindfulness to then work in the way it is supposed to work, and it becomes a way of kind of allowing you to live far better as a consequence. There's another nice simile I should tell you about this, because it is basically on the same topic. And this is a simile of the qualities of the stream enterer. The stream enterer in Buddhism is someone who is partly awakened, not full awakening, but partly awakened already. And so someone who is partly awakened, they have certain very unusual qualities. These are the qualities of what are called the Aryas, the noble people in the world, because they have a certain degree of awakening. And one of these qualities is a very, to my mind, very kind of, it's a very telling quality. And this quality is that they are perfected in virtue, perfected in their morality. Sometimes they make mistakes, but if they make a mistake, they confess straight away and they rectify whatever they have done. And the Buddha says it is a bit like a cow. When a cow has a little calf, how does the cow relate to that calf? And the way the cow relates to the calf is that regardless of what the cow does, if it goes grazing here or grazing there, or walks this way or walks that way, or goes back to the cow stall or whatever it is, that cow always has one eye on the calf. The reason why it has one eye on the calf is because the cow is attached to that calf. The calf is very important to that cow. And you can imagine how the cow always has one eye looking on the calf, no matter what she does. In exactly the same way, if you are a noble person, you always have one eye on virtue. Always one eye, always remembering it. It's always at the back of your mind. And if something happens whereby maybe some defilement arises or you're about to go wrong, then that view at the back of your mind informs the mind and then ensures that you do things in the right way. It's a power of the area that their virtue is perfected because they always have one eye on the virtue, always one eye on morality. And this is what we should be trying to emulate. We should try to be like the Aryas in this way, always having this at the back of our mind. So we are guided by kindness, guided by goodness, guided by morality in our daily life, in our interactions with everyone around us. And if you can do that, you are creating an incredibly powerful foundation for the Buddhist path. This is the foundation for the Buddhist path. You can see this in the sutta as they talk about meditation, about satipatthana meditation. And they say that there are two foundations for satipatthana meditation. One is right view, but the other one is even more powerful, is virtue, is morality. This is number one foundation for the practice of meditation practice. So if you can get these things together in this way, it becomes extraordinarily powerful. So that is one way of using right view, to make the path work. I'm going to tell you another way. One of the ways of right view in Buddhism is the idea that there is no self, there is no inherent essence to a human being. If you analyze yourself, if through meditation you look at your mind and you look at the body, all you find is changing phenomena. Everything is always moving. Your consciousness is changing. Your perceptions are always changing. Your feelings are always changing. Things are always changing inside of you. There's no essence within that. And that idea of non-self, it can seem very abstract to many people. Very often you don't know how to think about it, how to deal with it, what it actually means. But what I will show you is that this idea of non-self can be used in a very practical kind of way. This way is what allows you to have compassion for people in the world, and sometimes even loving kindness. These two words, metta and karuna in the Pali language. Metta means like friendliness or love, whereas karuna means compassion. And so it allows you to have love and compassion in the world. So very, very powerful things. So how does this work? And the way this works is that the Buddha has another beautiful simile. This is the simile that shows you why you should have compassion. And the Buddha says, you imagine a man, this is like someone who does kind of has bad conduct by body, speech, and mind. So the idea is, well, we should have compassion for a person who is bad by bad conduct by body, speech, and mind. So how is that possible? Well, the Buddha says, imagine that there is a man, or maybe a woman, someone, a person walking along a forest or a desert. And as they are walking along this wilderness, wherever it might be, they are sick. They have some kind of illness. They're not feeling well. And as they are walking, because it is the wilderness, there is no doctor, there is no nurse, there is no medicine, there are no people, there is no village, there is no house, there is nothing. They are just walking in the wilderness, desperate because they are sick. And so then the question is, well, how do you feel for a person like that? If you are standing a long way away, you can't really interfere because you're too far away. They can't see you because you're a long way away. Maybe you are seeing them through binoculars or something. How do you feel about that person? Well, usually you will feel a sense of compassion, right? You will feel that this person is suffering so much. There is no way that they will find anyone because there is nobody around to support them in any way at all. And you feel almost like a heartache. You feel a sense of, wow, I really hope that they find a doctor, that they find at least somebody, a person who can help them, maybe who can take them into their house, look after them, give them some food, give them some medicine or whatever. You're natural to feel compassion for someone like that because they are in a very desperate situation. And then the Buddha says, and this is what is so interesting, the Buddha says, well, if you meet someone in the world who is full of bad qualities, they have bad speech, they have bad actions, they have maybe even bad mind states, and sometimes we meet people like that. We meet people who are really out of control in their life. Well, a very natural reaction from us, if someone else is behaving really badly, if they have bad speech, if they have all of these bad things, a very natural reaction is to get upset with them, to get angry in return because they are treating us badly. And if they are treating us badly, they're treating me badly, then of course it's very easy to get angry. But the Buddha says, no, that is the wrong way to think. When someone is like this, when someone is full of bad qualities, what you should do, you should think of them like that sick person in the desert, the sick person in the wilderness. Because they are, at that time, when they have all those bad qualities, they are sick, and they don't have really anyone to lean on. They don't have a doctor. They don't have the Buddha. The Buddha is like the doctor here, right? They don't have the medicine. The medicine is like the Dhamma. They don't have any friends or people around them. This is like the Sangha or your Kalyana Mitras, your spiritual friends in life. All of those are missing. A person who is full of bad qualities and who doesn't understand that they have bad qualities, they are doomed to go towards a terrible future. Because if they carry on with those bad qualities in the future, well, they are going to have a miserable life. They will feel terrible about themselves. And eventually, when they pass away, when they die, very likely they will go to a bad destination because of those bad qualities. And so this is the right way to think about someone. When you see somebody with bad qualities, you should think of them like a sick person. And straight away, if you think of someone, maybe someone is talking to you in a bad way. This happens so commonly, right? People talk in the wrong way to us. They have the wrong tone of voice, or they say the wrong words, or whatever. It happens almost every day to most of us, I think. And then remember that at that moment, that person is sick. And it changes the equation completely. Because suddenly, instead of taking it personally, to think it is your problem, because we tend to think it is my problem when the other person is bad. Actually, it is not your problem at all. It is the problem of the other person. Why? Because they are sick. They have an issue. And suddenly, instead of getting angry with them, you can have compassion with them instead. So this is a beautiful way of thinking about the world, and it changes things completely. The reason why we get angry with other people when they do bad things towards us is because we take it personally. It is that person against us. They are talking to me. It is always about me, right? They are talking to me. If they talked bad like that to some other person, we wouldn't care so much. But because it is towards me, that is why we get angry and upset. But what you have to remember is that it is not about me. It is not about you. It is about that person. They are sick at that time. And the reason why they are sick is because of all the conditioning in the past. All the conditioning in the past comes together at that time. The way they were brought up, their past lives, the way they went to school, all of these things come together. And at that moment, it comes out through bad actions, through bad speech, through bad ways of thinking. And then you, because you happen to be there, you have to feel those bad actions from the other person. But actually, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with the internal dynamics of that person, how those dynamics come together at that time. And then they act in that way. They are a victim of their own conditioning. They are a victim of the past coming together at that time. They are a victim of their personality, if you like, because their personality is forcing them to do things that probably they don't want to do. This to me is one of those kind of interesting things, right? When bad people do bad things, sometimes they don't want to do those bad things. Sometimes they know that they should be acting in a different way. I think almost all of us, we know that being kind to others is the right thing, because when we are kind, we feel good about ourselves. Yeah. And if you do something bad, you feel bad about yourselves. But even though we know that kindness is the right way to go, sometimes we can't do it. We can't do it. Why? Because the forces inside of us are so strong that the badness, the immorality, the unethical conduct comes out of us anyway, even though we want to be good. And that is almost like a tragedy in a sense. It's tragic because we want to do the right thing, but we can't because the pressures inside of us are so strong. And so when another person talks to you in the wrong way, remember these ideas. They probably want to be kind, but the conditioning is so strong that they are unable to do so. They past, their habits, their personality, the things they have gone through in this life and in other lives forces them to act against their own best interest. And acting against your own best interest is basically like being sick. You're moving towards some kind of terrible destiny in the future because you're acting against your own best interest. That is the reality when someone around you behaves wrongly. This is a very powerful way of thinking, and it comes from the idea of non-self. And the reason is because if we had a self, well, then maybe we could overcome our conditioning, we could overcome our habits, we could short circuit all the problems, and we could act in a good way. But no, that isn't the reality. The reality is that we are taught by the conditioning. Yeah, this is the idea of non-self. There is no self outside of conditions that can make independent decisions. No, all decisions come through this network, this web of cause and conditions that forces us to do things and act things in a certain way. So this is why I said this is related to the right view of non-self. And so remember that. And the next time another person does something bad towards you, acts in the wrong way, says something wrong, remember, no, it is not your problem. It is their problem. They are having the problem. They are the one who's caught in delusion. You have to bear with it maybe for a few minutes because they are doing something stupid towards you. But for you, it's only a small thing. For them, it is a really, really big thing. And so look at them in that new way. Don't focus on yourself. And then at that moment, instead of being angry, you can have compassion instead. You can have kindness towards that person. It's a very powerful way of transforming your view, transforming the way you think about the world around you. And suddenly you will find that some of the people in your life that are the most difficult to love, the most difficult to have compassion for, maybe some of the people in the world who are very powerful and seem to do crazy things, suddenly you find, actually, I can have compassion even for them, because they often have no idea what they are doing. Yeah, they don't understand the future consequences of their actions. They don't understand how they are destroying themselves through these activities. And suddenly you open up another possibility, a new way of looking at the world, a new way of looking at the people around you, which is very, very powerful. And it helps you to become a less angry person. You have a mind which is more compassionate. And as you do that, your entire idea of morality, your entire ability to live a moral life is transformed, because all morality ultimately comes from the mind. If you have a good mind, everything else follows from that. So that is the second way in which right view is very useful. Yeah? So the first one is to use the idea of impermanence to make sure that you have a sense of urgency. Now I have to do the right thing. Yeah, I can't really wait. The second one is the idea of non-self, to understand that other people are caught in their habits, and so I should have compassion for them. And then the last one of these things, this is the last one I'm going to talk about. I think three, maybe I should have talked only about one, but I'm talking about three today. So the last one is one that can help you with your meditation practice. And this has to do with understanding what is valuable in the world, what has true value, what we should focus on, where we, what actually is really interesting here. And one of the things about meditation practice is that we need to somehow withdraw and pull back from the world of the five senses. Because in meditation, basically, we're shutting out the five senses. We want to be peaceful within. And the more interest we have in the world of the five senses, either by looking directly, but more usually about thinking about it, because we think, even if we don't experience the five senses, very often we think about them in the mind, and that's also a problem. And so we need a way to readjust, to reevaluate things. How can we have more interest in the meditation and less interest in the world? Yeah, this is a very important point. And so this is about creating new values, if you like. And one way of doing that is to focus on these very beautiful similes that the Buddha had about the five sense world and the dangers in the five sense world, and then the opposite benefit of the world of the mind, of the world of meditation, which has the opposite, doesn't have the problem of the five sense world, and it has all the benefits of withdrawing from that five sense world. And the Buddha used a simile again. I love the similes of the Buddha because they bring out the teaching in such powerful and beautiful ways. And so this simile of the Buddha is a simile of a dog. Yeah, and he says, well, human beings, we are a bit like dogs. Yeah, this is the dog here is like standing for the human beings. Yeah, and so this dog, he says, well, it's like a dog. Yeah, this is like in India. In India, the dogs are not looked after. In the modern societies and the West, the dogs are pampered, they are looked after, they're very different. In India, the dogs are kind of wild. They're full of manes, they're fighting each other all the time. It's a completely different ball game. So this is more like an Indian dog, yeah, not like a dog in Finland or Australia or whatever. And so this Indian dog, of course, hungry. Yeah, it's very difficult to get food for a dog in India. And so the dog tends to go to the butcher's shop. The butcher, yeah, where they kind of prepare the meat and all of these kind of things. So it kind of sits outside the butcher shop, yeah, the dog kind of looking up into the window, trying to look cute, yeah, big eyes, trying to look as cute as possible, thinking that if I look cute, then maybe the butcher will have compassion on me, yeah, and then maybe it will throw me some meat or whatever. And so it's sitting outside, and then the butcher, it sees this kind of dog sitting on the outside, and the butcher thinks, no, the meat is too expensive. There's no way I'm going to give the meat to the dog. So it scrapes the bone completely clean of meat. And all that is left is a bone. And of course, on the bone, there will be some blood. The blood will be smeared on the bone. And then the butcher thinks, okay, this bone, it doesn't have any value to me because it doesn't have any value. Okay, I will give that to the dog. And so it throws the bone out to the dog. Yeah. And then the dog gets the bone. And then the dog tries to ignores this bone, yeah, eating the bone. And all it does is get the taste of blood because the bone is smeared in blood. And because the taste of blood makes the dog even more hungry. It was hungry when it got to the butcher shop. Now it gets the taste of these things. It gets even more hungry. Craving becomes even more powerful. But there is no sustenance. There is no meat. There is nothing to fill that dog. The dog is just as hungry as before. All it does is giving rise to even more craving than before. And so after a while, the dog kind of gets frustrated. It runs off. And when it runs off to the next butcher shop. And it hangs out the next butcher, hoping that maybe the next butcher is more compassionate to dogs. But in India, all the butchers are the same. There's no compassion for dogs. Yeah, it's all only about making money out of the meat. And so this second butcher does exactly the same. It takes off all the meat, and when there's only a bone left with blood, it throws it to the dog. And again, the dog chews on this bone. It gets the taste of the blood. The craving becomes even stronger again because it gets the taste, but no sustenance, no real meal, nothing to be able to fill this dog. And so it goes on and on. Another butcher, another butcher, another butcher. And eventually, as the dog is running around this way from butcher to butcher, eventually it dies. And when it dies, because it is a dog in the previous life, it gets reborn as a puppy in this life. And when it gets reborn as a puppy, its mummy takes it. And the mummy takes it where? The mummy takes it to the butcher. And then the whole cycle starts again, going to the next butcher and the next butcher, on and on, life after life, never really learning the lesson because this lesson is very hard to learn. Yeah, very difficult for a dog to understand what is going on. And so the Buddha says that, well, we are in many ways like that dog. We run through our lives, we are craving this, craving that. And every time we have craving, craving tells you, well, if you get this, then you will be happy. If you get this partner, that partner will make you really happy. If you get this kind of house, then you will be happy. If you get this kind of job, then you will be happy. If you get, finally, when you become a pensioner, well, then you will be really happy and you can travel around and enjoy yourself. And before you know it, you are dead. And none of those things really happened. You were just driven by craving all along. Whispering in your ear, then you will be happy. But every time, craving turns out to be a liar. Craving lies to you. Every time, it is hollow. Every time, it doesn't really reach any real fulfillment. It doesn't really do anything to you. It just drives you on and on and on. And that is the five sense world. The five sense world never leads to satisfaction. It is always hollow. It is always empty. There is nothing there that can really fulfill you. And that is the problem with the five sense world. It is very impermanent, very unreliable, very uncertain. And that is why the Buddha says it is also filled with an enormous amount of suffering. The happiness is small, and the suffering is often quite great, like the simile of the dog. And so what is the alternative? Well, the alternative is to find your happiness somewhere else. The alternative is to find your happiness on the spiritual path. And one of the things that you will discover as you practice the spiritual life is that the happiness that comes from simple things like being generous or being kind to other people, it is a different kind of happiness than the happiness of the five sense world. The happiness of generosity and the happiness of kindness, it doesn't have that craving with it. It is fulfilling in a different way. You feel a sense of completion when you have the happiness that comes from the spiritual practice. And this becomes especially true when it comes to meditation practice. If you meditate, you become peaceful inside. After a while, you don't want to do anything else. There is no feeling that you need to do anything more. You become fulfilled inside. This is kind of one of the beautiful things about meditation, especially when the joy becomes strong and when the stillness and the peace of the mind become powerful. It is like you don't want to do anything else in the whole world. And then you keep on practicing in this way. You keep on deepening your meditation more and more and more until one day you enter a deep state of meditation, states that are called samadhi or jhanas in Buddhism. And when you enter those deep states of samadhi, you don't want anything else in the whole world. And because you don't want anything else in the whole world, it feels like you have discovered the meaning of life itself. That dog is always chasing more, always running around, being a slave to the craving. Now you have finally found the opposite. You have given up the five sense world, and on the spiritual path, you have found real satisfaction, real happiness, real contentment, because that is what the spiritual path promises you, and that is why it is so powerful. And so if you understand this distinction between the five sense world on the one hand and the spiritual path on the other, if you start to understand how this works, how the five sense world is always going to let you down, always going to be problematic, and if you understand that the spiritual path has the ability to give you everything you ever wanted, then your values start to change. When you sit down in meditation and you remind yourself of this, you remind yourself of the problem of the five sense world, then you let go of those five senses quite easily, and your mind moves on to the path of meditation instead. Why? Because your values have changed. Suddenly, the breath becomes something very interesting, because the breath promises you the highest meaning you can possibly get. Suddenly, the breath is what actually matters, and the five sense world is kind of irrelevant. Your values, your ideas about the world, your outlook, your right view isn't, because you're thinking about the world in the right way. And then this then becomes how right view itself makes meditation possible and empowers the meditation practice. So these are some of the ideas of how you can use the idea of right view to power your spiritual life and power your every aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path. There are many, many more such ways, but these are some of the ways that are most important to me and the ways that I use in my own practice. I only talk about things that I use myself. And if you use these things, then you are building up the Noble Eightfold Path from the very bottom, from the very beginning, and everything flows from that. Everything kind of is driven from that. Yeah, your path builds up. The right view becomes even more strong, and as it becomes more strong, the path becomes even more powerful, and you get this beautiful snowball effect. Very apt Nordic metaphor, the snowball effect, balling up, becoming larger and larger, until eventually you too can actually go to the end or towards the very purpose of the spiritual path.